Hello, my name is Owen. Today I'll be talking about the 5 worst books that I have ever read, or in the last few years at least. I was just going to do the top 5 books that I didn't finish. However, I realized that I don't actually not finish books a lot. There are 2 books on this list that I DNF'd, but other than that, I just couldn't think of any. So I kind of shortened a little bit. So it's the top 5 books like within the last 2 or 3 years that I read that I absolutely despised. And some of these books are kind of popular. All right, so I'm expecting a little bit of blowback, but it's supposed to be a dialogue, right? And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. These books are bad. However, actually, there's a caveat in there, but we'll get there when we get there. So we're going to jump straight into it. The first book on this list is the one that's right there in gleaming white. It's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I did a review of this over the summer. I believe it was in the month of August. And the more I've sat with it, the more I disliked the way that the story went. I said in my review, and you guys can watch the whole thing, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but it starts off as like how aliens think that college students and teenagers speak and act, and then it's on top of that another layer of how the author thinks smart people would talk too, and they just end up sounding like they're not human, and it's very forced, and then it starts like they're gamers, so it starts to get gamer talk too, and there was no personality, and it felt lifeless in the dialogue, and it was very, very cringy. And then like the romance starts, or like the relationship starts between Sam and Sadie, and like it develops, and I think it does improve when they become adults, but then it just takes like a left turn into being really about like one of the other side characters, who I think is like the most cardboard cutout character that ever exists, and then something happens, and then the big event. I'm not going to spoil it. It's a very popular book in case you want to read it. But I just think like for a book that I can see even today consistently lauded, consistently promoted, the book is not good, and I think it's a shame that other books don't get as much attention as this one did, because it's quite frankly not worth the effort. And that's the first one on the list. I know it sounds harsh, but it's true. The second book on this list is 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, when I read this book like 6 months ago, I did not put together that the author was the same guy who's famous for "Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who." I did not put that together. Like the transphobic guy on Twitter is the guy that wrote this book. Did not put the pieces together. So it really honestly, whether or not I should have or not, I went into this book not knowing like the background of like who this Jordan Peterson guy is, or who he's devolved to, at least. Because this book was written like a handful of years ago. But I was just looking for like self-help, like kind of like pseudo-philosophy type books, because I started reading a little bit of like stoicism stuff just because I'm interested in the topic, and I was looking for popular books in the genre, and this is one of them. It's a very popular book, and it is bad. And it's not that it's very political like Jordan Peterson is now. It's really not. And a lot of the base 12 rules are very simple, and they make a lot of sense. And when he initially explains them, they make sense to me, and I actually like agree with a lot of his rules. However, Peterson's writing style is very, very egotistical, in the sense that he presents an idea. Obviously, he presents it as fact because it's the 12 rules for life that you must follow. But he keeps going, and he belabors the point, and he adds metaphors on top of analogies, in a way that you could just tell like how much he's like looking down on everyone else. And these are such simple rules that he did not invent too. Like one of his most famous ones is like clean your room. But it's always been like tidy your home before you like whatever. I don't know what the saying is. It's like you gotta care of yourself before you could think about like others and stuff like that. It's not a new concept. He just worded it in kind of like a more catchy way, which is good. And if you're writing a book about that, like rewording like old philosophies is a great way to introduce it to a new audience. But then he just talks way too much. He over-explains simple concepts, and the book was like 400 pages long, but it was 200 pages longer than it should have been. And he just goes on way too long. And eventually he goes on so long that his points no longer seem very good. And I can't even quite explain it, because it's like I agree with him until he just talks too much, and then I'm like, should I be listening to you? And the other major problem is that he's clearly a very religious man, and a lot of his justifications in later chapters revolve around Old Testament and and like gospel and how it ties into, well, this is true because like exhibit 1, this part of the Bible. And it's like, if you're gonna make your facts based on religious evidence, it's a religious book. It's no longer a scientific study. It's no longer like, you could have those things separate, but you need to promote the book as like 12 rules for life, how to get closer to God. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with those kinds of books, but you can't disguise your science as your like just promoting your religion and your personal beliefs. And couple that with the long-windedness, it just ruins a lot of his credibility, which is a shame for this book, because there are like some base ideas there that are pretty decent. It's not a shame for him as a person, though. I really have no sympathy for him. Moving on to the next book is Thunderstruck by Erik Larson. This one was really a disappointment because Erik Larson is probably my favorite nonfiction author. Devil in White City is like one of the best books that I've ever read, period. I definitely recommend checking it out. However, like I said in the review for that, it's also on the channel, so I'm not going to belabor it again. Erikson does a great thing in his books where he has two separate storylines, and then they're like tangentially related to each other, and then at the end, it's like the climax is how they're both either doing something in the very exact same moment, or how one's actions influence the other's actions in like the climactic scene of the book. It's fantastic, edge of your seat type stuff. But this one, the two storylines were not connected enough for me. So we spent all this time and you're expecting them, and he's really trying to force something. It's like, oh, these guys such a direct impact to each other, but really they lived like 30 years apart or something like that. And like the technology that one invented was only like a small part of this other guy's thing. And what they did at the end like wasn't even that amazing. So it didn't feel like really like, these are two stories that seem separate but are really together. It really felt like these are two stories that he's really trying to convince us have anything to do with each other, and neither story is that particularly interesting. So it was really just a disappointment of a book, and it was definitely my least favorite of his books. I'm still gonna read his books though. I think there's one in like the Lusitania, I believe, that I haven't read yet. I'm gonna be checking that out eventually because I love Erik Larson, but this book was just a disappointment. Moving on to the fourth book. Now this is one of my ruffles some feathers. It is The Dark Tower, and not the series, the last book in the series. I did not finish this book, which is unheard of for me. I rarely not finish books, and especially if I already read 6 books in the series, I'm not going to finish the finale, the culmination. I don't even think I got halfway through it. Because the thing with Stephen King's Dark Tower series is, obviously, it's like the nexus of all of his books, and all like there's like hints and cameos and other characters coming in, and I get that. However, I just felt like book 7 went off the deep end in such a strange way, like where it's just like it used to be a Western, but with some space elements and like a little bit like Enter the Real World and like the combination of that. But then it was just like the Salem's Lot vampires, and they're fighting the vampires, and oh, the guy you thought that was a villain, like the man in black. Oh, guess what? He's like really the underling of some guy, and they're on a planet, and there's like, and the Stephen King's there. He's like, I'm Stephen King. I'm in the book. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing, Stephen? Like, I understand, like, well, first of all, like the books were going downhill afterwards. Like one of my favorite books in the series is the prequel book, where it's just Roland as a young kid, like his prequel story. That's one of my favorite books of all time. But after that book, when they start to like get more pop culture, like I think there's like the one battle and like where it's basically, I don't remember the context honestly, but I just know like there's like stormtroopers fighting against them, and I think they like reference like Mickey Mouse. And I get it's like getting more pop culture, and like I was fine with that, but the plot was kind of going downhill there. But by the 7th book, I just felt like it wasn't the same as like the first 4 or 5 books. Like it wasn't about the characters anymore. It was about the spectacle, and I didn't like where the spectacle was going. It got too cosmic. It got too self-referential. It got too like weird, quite frankly, that it took away the emotional heart. And I had to look up like what happens at the end because I was just curious. And I don't like the ending because I didn't get to experience it. Like I didn't read that part of the book. Like, spoiler for End of the Dark Tower. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to run away. But like basically, it's like that he repeats the cycle, and he's always trying to destroy the Dark Tower. He's always trying to catch the Man in Black, and like it ends when it starts at the beginning. And like, that just sounds stupid to me. And like, it's like, oh, well, if you would have read it, it's like beautifully written. Sure it is, right? But I'm not going to read 500 pages of vampire drovel, to get to it. And it's such a disappointment because I know the people that are diehards for this series. But it just went off the rails, and I don't think it's a me problem. I think you have to work to enjoy that final book because it just doesn't make any sense. And quite frankly, I despise that book for how it took a series that I loved. The third book is fantastic. I think it's the third. Maybe I'm just thinking it's called The Drawing of Three. I'm thinking it's the third book. But the one where you meet Eddie and goes in the real world, like, that's an incredible book. And Roland is a fantastic character. But you just start fighting vampires, and it's just like, it's like Game of Thrones Season 8. The ending is so bad, I never want to revisit any of the other ones. You made the list, because The Stand is my favorite book of all time, Stephen King, so I got to give you credit, but like, you are a fool. You're a fool for that book. You're a fool for it. And you know what? Prove me wrong. Try to explain to me why I'm wrong. I won't believe you, though. I'm not going to try it again. I mean, maybe you can convince me, but I'm not going to read it again. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Number 5, this is another one that might ruffle some feathers. But however, this is the one with the caveat. My number 5 worst book that I've read recently, and this is recently within the last 3 months, Moby Dick. Moby Dick. I did not finish this book. And before you start typing away, let me explain myself. This is the only book on this list that is bad because I'm an idiot. Because a lot of people, a lot of booktubers I respect, a lot of people that I respect love this book. They think it's one of the greatest books of all time. It's the most beautiful prose. It's poetic. It's tragic. I watched the Whale movie, which has a lot of Moby Dick references. Obviously, it's a classic. But everyone is unanimous in saying that it's incredible. But I did not enjoy a single second of reading it. I thought Ishmael was an interesting protagonist, but I just did not connect with him. I did not connect with the story. I think it was too slow. I think it was too meandering. But I watched videos about the specific problem, and I'm convinced that I'm just not ready at the point in my life to read and to enjoy Moby Dick. And that's why it's bad now. But I just put it down. Eventually, I'm like, I'm not going to force my way through it because I'm already not enjoying it, and I'm like 200 pages in. I'm going to stop, I'm going to put it down, and I'm not going to even think about finishing it until I think it's going to feel right. Right now, it doesn't feel right. Maybe in a year from now, maybe in 2 years from now, I'll feel ready to jump back in. But I did not like it right now. But this one's on me, to end on a positive note. And by positive note, like, I'm like giving the book the credit and taking the hit myself. 5 worst books I read recently. Let me know what you think. What are the worst books that you've read recently? Let me know so I can avoid them. I will say overall, the video's over, you guys can leave. However, I will say that I think I have like a sixth sense for like whether or not I'm going to enjoy a book. Because like tomorrow, I just read it because I'm like, I've never read a Barnes & Noble book of the month before, so I'm going to try it. I didn't really expect to like it. And in that way, I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would, but I still didn't like it. Obviously, it made the list. Dark Tower was the only one that like really gut punched me. 12 Rules for Life, I don't really read that genre. I wasn't know what to expect. And the Moby Dick, I'm just not smart enough yet to read it. And Thunderstruck was fine. It was just his worst book, you know? But I think I rarely read books that I hate. And one of my friends on Goodreads, like, I always give like 4 or 5 stars. She's like, no way all the books you read are 4 or 5 stars. You think it's a perfect book? I'm like, I just don't think of ratings that way. I'm going to be honest with you. If it made me laugh, if it made me smile, it's a 5-star in my eyes. So I'm really light on books, honestly. However, these books, they're on my list, clearly. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. And if you didn't like the video, I got some books that you're really going to enjoy. Start at 0 seconds and read them well. You're going to love them. Bye.